Hello, everybody. I am Jayme CheeseSlice, and you are watching Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm the engineer and producer of the show, and today we've got a good one for you. We have Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector and geopolitical and military analyst. He will be joining us, which is perfect timing because there's a lot to talk about right now with what's going on in the world, especially in the region of the Middle East, or also known as Western Asia, more appropriately known as Western Asia. Let's go ahead and bring on our hosts, Gloria and Jayme. Hello, guys. Um, for the
Hey,
viewers at
Jayme.
home, if this is the first time you have watched this show, this is a radio program first and foremost. We're just recording it here live on YouTube for you to watch it so you can see how the whole process goes. So sometimes I might have to interrupt or something like that. But that's the deal here. We're a radio show. We're just recording it live on YouTube. So let's go ahead and bring on our guest, Scott. How are you today, Scott? I hope you're doing well.
Hey, Scott.
All right. I'm going to hand over to Gloria. She's going to start the show for the radio program. We're going to start the recording, and let's do that right now.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome former UN weapons inspector and Marine intelligence officer Scott Ritter. In our circle, he is a whistleblower and hero for taking on the federal government to expose the lie that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that the Bush administration's stated rationale for invasion and occupation was baseless and a fraud against the American people and the world. We are truly honored to have Scott on our radio show. We booked him way before the Trump administration started bombing Iran and appreciated that he has stuck with us, even though he is the hottest ticket going right now on the podcast news circuit. We truly thank Scott for joining us here today. While we generally focus on evergreen topics, today we want to talk about a chilling reality that's unfolding right before our eyes that Scott has been warning us about for years through his powerful books and speaking engagements. In his book, Target Iran, The Truth About the White House's Plans for Regime Change, Scott exposes how U.S. administrations, influenced heavily by Israeli concerns, have hype claims about Iran's nuclear program to justify aggressive policies aimed at regime change. He argues that these claims are exaggerated and misleading, much like the pretexts used before the Iraq invasion. Scott lays bare the risks that we are seeing today. Pushing Iran into a corner destabilizes the region and sparks wider conflict with nuclear consequences if miscalculations occur. Scott remains prophetic. Recent attacks on Iran, strikes tied to regime change ambitions, have escalated tensions dramatically. Iran has retaliated strongly, demonstrating its missile capabilities and resolve. Scott has repeatedly pointed out that Iran isn't pursuing offensive nuclear weapons, but maintains a strong conventional deterrent. As predicted, U.S. and Israeli assaults push Tehran towards desperate measures and may trigger escalation that draws in nuclear armed powers. Now, let's layer on an even bigger threat, the recent expiration of the New START Treaty. This was the last major arms control agreement limiting U.S. and Russian strategic nuclear arsenals. In Scott's book, Highway to Hell, The Armageddon Chronicles 2015 to 2024, he chronicles the death of the arms control. From the U.S. withdrawal from treaties like the INF to the abandonment and verification mechanisms and the shift in U.S. nuclear posture from pure deterrence to potential first use scenarios. Scott describes this path explicitly as a highway to hell, where the absence of caps and inspections dramatically increases the odds of miscalculation, leading to nuclear war, not just with Russia, but in cascading crises involving China, North Korea, or with a regional flashpoint like Iran. Scott has been blunt. The end of New START is earth ending, significant. Without restraints, we are in a new arms race with deployed warheads able to surge unchecked. Verification is gone. Trust is shattered, and the margin for error shrinks to nothing. Scott's book, Disarmament in the Time of Pestrika, reminds us what successful arms control looks like, drawing from his own experience as a weapons inspector implementing the INF Treaty with the Soviets. He shows how verification and dialogue once reduced nuclear threats. We had that potential until we threw it away. Now we're closer to nuclear war than at any point since the Cold War's height. The combination of unchecked nuclear arsenals and reckless military adventurism against Iran is a deadly mix. Stay tuned. This conversation could be one of the most important you'll hear, because if we don't heed these warnings, the highway to hell might just lead us straight into Armageddon. Thank you. Scott, please dive deeper into your books, the current crisis with Iran, and what must be done to pull us back from the brink of nuclear war.
Well, I don't know what else I can say after that wonderful introduction. I mean, that was fantastic. I'm also a little intimidated to be on with Jayme. Jayme and I have talked in the past, and I owe him an article or two for his magazine, and I have failed to deliver. Jayme, it's just because I've been very busy, not because I've been ignoring you, but forgive me.
So yeah, it'd be great if you can write for us, definitely.
I'm going to try my best. I just have to find the time to do it, so I do it properly. If my name's going to be on an article in your magazine, it's got to be a good article, one that isn't just shallow and superficial. I owe you the best I can deliver, so I'll do my best to deliver.
Yeah.
First of all, again, Gloria, thank you very much for that. I don't know where to begin because we're dealing with two existential crises. We're dealing with the death of arms control, and it is the death. There is no arms control today. Not only that, but it's even more disturbing. There's no desire for arms control in the United States. We have lost the muscle memory of disarmament. There was a time when I cut my teeth on it. You mentioned the book Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika. I love that book. I'm very proud of that book because it's a deeply personal book, but it also is a detailed history of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty and the people who made it happen. I was not an arms control specialist when they recruited me. I was just a stupid Marine out in the middle of the desert learning how to kill Russians. But they looked at my college resume and thought that because I was a Russian history major and I took 2 years of Russian language, that I could actually speak the Russian language. No, I barely speak American English. But they recruited me, they brought me into the company of giants, the men and women who, in the height of the Cold War, had earned the title Foreign Area Officer, Soviet Foreign Area Officer, were genuine subject matter experts. They spoke the language fluently. They were immersed in the culture. They knew Russia and the Soviet Union like the back of their hand. And they were given this responsibility of implementing a treaty that incorporated for the first time on-site inspection. That means that U.S. inspectors would be on Soviet soil and Soviet inspectors on U.S. soil doing intrusive inspections to verify compliance. This had been something that had been talked about since the 1960s, but neither side trusted one another enough to allow this kind of access because we do have, each country has an active history of espionage and using humans to carry out other actions other than that which would be required by the treaty. So there had to be a level of trust. Just so people understand, I was an intelligence officer and I was somebody who cut my teeth on the Cold War. And so when I was brought in and ended up in the middle of Vodkinsk, 750 miles due east of Moscow in the foothills of the Ural Mountains, in a denied area where no Westerner had been since German prisoners of war were evicted in 1954, I thought that I had been given carte blanche to do my job. And I came back after my first trip with such innovative ideas. I mean, if we could do this, if we could do that, if we could do this, I could gain access. And I was locked up by General LaJoy, Roland LaJoy, again, one of the legends of the Foreign Area Officer program. And he said, if you ever talk about this again, I will fire you on the spot. He said, we're not there to spy on Russia. We're there to do something far more important. We're there to implement this treaty in good faith. Our president, President Ronald Reagan, signed this treaty, and it's our duty to make this treaty work. And we make this treaty work by adhering strictly to the mandate given to us by the treaty and nothing more. If you see something through serendipity, report it. But if you actively search out things, I will fire you. You're not there to spy. You're not there to undermine their security. You're there to enhance our security by doing compliance verification. And the reason why I bring this up is that this is the importance of arms control. It's serious business. And to do this job, you have to have serious people who train to do this job, who are qualified to do this job, who have the right mindset to do this job. You have to believe in the potential of disarmament. And when we signed that treaty in 1987 and began implementation in 1988, it didn't happen in a vacuum. We're talking about a treaty that was built upon, at that point in time, 20 years, 25 years of disarmament work by giants of the business. Paul Nitze, people might not know his name today, but Paul Nitze was the negotiator that led, that brought about the INF treaty. Paul Nitze cut his teeth on the issue of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima in the aftermath. He was the guy that led the initial commission that went into there. Paul Nitze crafted the Cold War. He is the architect of the Cold War. Paul Nitze was there from the beginning and was there throughout it. And Paul Nitze understood that if we continued down the path that we're headed on, we were all going to die. And therefore, this Cold Warrior, this man there was not a liberal bone in this man's body. But he understood the importance of arms control and verification. And he's the man that allowed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces issue to be the one that introduced intrusive on-site inspections into the compliance verification mix. And I am so proud that I had an opportunity to play a part of this. Again, I'll plant this flag every chance I get. I was the first weapons inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union. So when people talk about the first man on the moon, I was the first weapons inspector in American history. And I'm proud of that. I'm not saying I'm the best. I didn't do a bad job, but I'm just saying I was the first. And I will take that to my grave because that means more to me than just about it. Because it meant that, I wrote the book. I helped write the book on arms control, on on-site inspections. And then I went out there and I did it through hard work. What we did in Vodkensk, it's just mind-bending. If you, there's a Russian word, mind-bending. And that's what we were. We were bending the minds of people, changing attitudes, changing my attitude. As I said, when I was recruited for this job, I had just spent 2.5 years in the deserts of 29 Palms exclusively focused on killing Russians. That's all I trained to do. And we trained 24/7 back then. I studied them. I went to schools to learn about them. I used their equipment. I trained on their equipment. I studied their tactics, and I devised ways that we could kill them in combat because that was my job as a Marine. When I showed up in Vodkensk, I can't say that, I was thrilled because I was a Russian historian. So I'm like, wow, I'm in the Soviet Union. This is amazing. But they were the enemy. They were the enemy. And trust me, they looked at us and went, you're the enemy as well. But it's amazing what happens when two people sit there and look at each other's enemies, but then you open up the treaty and you go, hey, we've got to put a light pole here, and we got to get it up there. We got to put a camera on it. But the light pole where it's supposed to be interferes with the operation of a schlagbaum that's supposed to stop the rail traffic in there. We got to move the light pole. Well, you can't move the light pole. It's on the diagram. And the diagram is the treaty. Yeah, but if we leave the light pole there, well, how do we work this one out? And so we have to sit down and now we start rolling up our sleeves, and we're not enemies anymore. We're people sitting there going, how do we make this happen? How do we make this work? And it's a simple problem of moving the light pole, but it's not simple because you're at a secret military installation. where they're concerned that everything we're going to do is going to be spying. We're putting closed circuit cameras outside the gates of an intercontinental ballistic missile factory. So it's not a simple thing. They have their KGB guys there looking at us the whole time going, what are you up to? What are you up to? And then we got to lay cables underground, the power cables. But are we running them parallel to their power cables? Because we have a history of using our power cables to latch onto their power cables to spy on the data going in and out. We had to learn to trust each other. We had to learn to trust each other. We had to learn that we were on the same side. And that's the most important lesson from there, because it wasn't about the American side, the Russian side. Of course it was, but it was about the arms control side. How do we collectively make this treaty that our respective leaders signed off on and said, this is important for our nations? Because there were people in the Soviet Union that didn't want this treaty to happen. And there were people in the United States that didn't want this treaty to happen. And if we made a mistake, they would kill the treaty. And our mission, installing this giant X-ray machine called Cargo Scan, became ground zero for the survival of the treaty. Jesse Helms was a senator, very powerful senator in the Senate. He wanted to kill the treaty, and because of the complexities of installation, we were behind schedule. It wasn't the Soviets' fault; it was our fault. We're the ones who screwed up the documentation. We're the ones who didn't think this thing out, and we're falling further and further behind. And Jesse Helms is blaming it on the Soviets. The Soviets have failed to comply because the treaty said after 6 months this has to be up and running. And it's not up and running. Therefore, the Soviets to blame. We're like, it's not their fault. It's our fault. No, and then the Soviets, instead of sitting there going, nah, you guys suck, they went, we got to fix this. We got to make this happen. We have a responsibility. They said, we have a responsibility to have this thing up and running. So quit screwing around, sit down with us, and let's get this thing fixed. And we fixed it. And we made it work. And it was wonderful. But this is like going to the gym. You know, doing this stuff that I'm talking about, you're exercising arms control muscles. You're exercising the brain, but you're also exercising, how it works, how to sit down and collaborate with one another. And we were very fit, very fit. The INF Treaty got us into professional athleticism when it comes to arms control. Then we shifted over to START Treaty, and we moved on to more advanced weightlifting. Then the Cold War ended, and the United States stopped taking the Russians seriously. And we just, to give you an example, one of the foundational elements of the whole arms control infrastructure, the architecture, was the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty signed in 1972. Basically, this opened the door for arms control because what it did is recognize that nuclear wars cannot be won. Therefore, they should never be fought. But if we acknowledge they can't be won, then making a defense against nuclear weapons is a futile exercise that only encourages the further development of weapons of mass destruction that will lead us to the brink of war. Meaning that if I build a missile defense system, you're going to build something to defeat the system. Then I have to improve my defenses. You improve yours, and we get to a hair trigger where one mistake and we're all dead. Goodbye. We saw this as they built better defenses. We came up with instead of going 1-to-1, because the way to fire your missile, I fire a missile, I intercept it. Ooh, you fire a missile, I fire 3 missiles to guarantee I intercept it. Ooh, put 10 warheads on one missile, fire it, and I got 10 warheads in. I don't 7 warheads get through. I need to get 21 interceptors now for those 10. So I fire 1 missile and I need 21 interceptors. Do you see what's happened here, ladies and gentlemen? The price of defense just went through the roof. And we realized that we were in the midst of an arms race that was going to bankrupt both sides and lead us to war. Because now what we have to do is think about not, launching this. We have to figure out how we do a surprise attack. How can I launch so they can't launch their defenses? How do I take out capability to nullify this? And now we've bring right close to the end of the world. And so ABM was foundational because now we said you can't win a nuclear war. So what do we do with all these weapons we have? 30,000 nuclear weapons on each side. Well, we have to start, first of all, we have to start talking about limiting them because we were in the arms race. We were just building. We were just maximum. So then we go to strategic arms limitation. How to slow the pace of growth and how to instill confidence. But they still wouldn't let inspectors on the ground. No inspectors. But we did SALT. We did SALT 2. limiting, but now we have to reverse because we're still growing. Well, the first thing we tried tackling strategic arms reduction. We couldn't get to that because, again, compliance verification. But we had a crisis, intermediate nuclear forces crisis. The Russians deployed a missile called the SS-20. It was a missile that had 3 warheads. And suddenly Russia had the balance of power decisively shifted in their favor in the European theater of operations. So much so that if we had a war, we would have lost because the SS-20 was that much of a dominant weapon system. So we responded by saying we have to inject our own intermediate nuclear forces capability into Europe. This led off a big crisis, just to show the power of people, by the way, just so people keep saying, what can we do? What can we do? The Germans overthrew their government because of this. I'll say that one more time. The Germans actually caused their government to fall because of this. And there are major demonstrations in the street that had a major impact on what everybody was doing. We put 1 million people, we Americans put 1 million people into Central Park in June of 1982. And that woke up the Reagan administration. The power of the people, baby. It's beautiful when it happens. So all you compliant sheep back there are sitting at home going, what can I do? What can I do? Get off your asses and go to the street. Maybe put 1 million people into Central Park about Iran, about all these other issues, and make the government wake up. Surround the White House with 1 million people. They'll wake up. Shut Washington, D.C. down with 5 million people. They'll wake up. The people have power if we choose to exercise the power, and it doesn't have to be violence. It has to be peaceful. Hold your hand, sing Kumbaya, sing whatever the hell you want to sing. I don't care. Sing rap songs. I'll be out there rapping with you. But the point is, make your voices heard in the cause of peace. But your voice sitting at home shouting at the television, which I do often, by the way, I'm not condemning people because it's one of my favorite pastimes is to turn on mainstream TV and shout at them. My dogs are very entertained when daddy goes off. But we have the ability to make our voices heard, but we don't do it. We can't even get 35 people out anymore. And most of the people that show up are long in the tooth, arthritic in the knees, and gray in the head because they're all people that, did this during Vietnam. Where are the millennials? Where are the millennials? There's my challenge to the millennials. Prove me wrong. Put 1 million millennials into Central Park on any issue, but I'd like to see it about arms control, maybe stopping the war in Iran. And I'll believe you guys are worthy of the title American citizen. Because you might get it by being born here, but you're not a citizen until you actually live the life of citizenship, which means the life of responsibility, a life that says that we, the people of the United States of America, empowered by a constitution that defines who and what we are. It's the only document that does so, by the way. Nothing else matters. So millennials, I know we failed you on the civics thing. We screwed up. Read the Constitution. And while you're reading the Constitution, do me a favor. Read the Federalist Papers. I'll just give you 2. Federalist 10, Federalist 51. Read them and learn why it's important that we don't allow an executive become all powerful. Why it's important that we don't allow our nation to be broken up into factions. Because you're out there supporting causes, but understand a cause that is supported outside the framework of the constitutional republic leads to the factionalization of the nation, and that's the death of the nation. James Madison said it great in Federalist 10. Read it. Learn from your history. Learn who we are and what we are. And if you want to know about the importance of checks and balances, why it's important to have an independent judiciary and a Congress that actually stands up and defends its role as Congress, read Federalist 51, again, written by James Madison, one of the great founding fathers out there. And then if you really want to get into it, read the Anti-Federalist Papers, because then you'll understand how we got the Bill of Rights and why the Bill of Rights is important, including freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the things that we need to do as a people to remind those whom we elect who they work for. So we need to get out there and exercise our responsibilities as citizenship. But we started down this path of arms control. We got the INF Treaty. The INF Treaty was an accident because we deployed these systems into Europe. We got it to the brink of war. We were literally on the brink of thermonuclear war. We were all going to die. When you have a Pershing II system, nuclear armed, in West Germany, and 7 minutes after launch, it takes out the Kremlin. You understand you've eliminated all ability of the Kremlin to think rationally about accidents. We got lucky a couple times. We got lucky when a Russian launch officer understood that what he was seeing couldn't be true. It had to be a glitch in the radar, so he didn't give the order to fire, or else we'd all be dead. Because if he followed protocol, we'd be dead. The other thing is Able Archer. I mean, again, we talk about the importance of confidence building. In 1983, we didn't have any confidence. We were at the height of the Cold War. We distrusted each other immensely. And so the United States was exercising, as part of the Reforger exercise, exercising our ability to wage a nuclear conflict. Because when you have nuclear weapons, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? You got to train to use them. I was in a Marine nuclear capable artillery battalion, and I was the personal responsibility officer, and I was the guy that helped facilitate. We trained twice a year to fire nuclear weapons, and we were ready to use them. And had we gone to war and been given the order to use them, we would have used them. That's what happens when you have nuclear weapons. It's not kids' game. It's not a joke. It's not, we have nuclear weapons. We have people training to use nuclear weapons. And when you train to use nuclear weapons, it becomes a tool in a toolbox. And we have policymakers, when they look at problems, that says, do we have a tool that can accomplish this? Especially when we get involved in a bind like Iran, where we got jumped in and we go, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. We're losing. We have to change our war plan every day because we don't know what to do. Nuclear weapons might be the solution. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I can guarantee you about 90 days from now, there will be a conversation in the White House about either accepting defeat and the strategic implications of that, or going nuclear. I promise you, I can give you a 100% guarantee that conversation will be had. And if we have a cult of personality devoid of any connectivity to the people, we will go to nuclear war. Okay, I just told you why you need to get to the streets of the city. Surround the White House, go to Central Park, seize Central Park. Don't wait for a stupid permit. Take over the park. You're the people of the United States of America. You want to play stupid games, you're going to die stupid deaths, because we're all going to die. We are on a highway to hell. I mean, I named that book appropriately. Not only do I like AC/DC, and I really do like that song, but it's appropriate for what we are. We are on a highway to hell, a one-way path, a one-way ticket to hell, because we have eliminated all the things that are designed to prevent nuclear war, including arms control. They did the INF Treaty the way they did because we had no choice. We had boxed ourselves into a corner and we were going to die. And so they said, we'll go to zero. And we got rid of all the weapons. And it was great. I keep telling people, if you meet me, shake my hand, buy me a beer, because if it weren't for me, you'd be dead. And that's the God's honest truth. If it weren't for me and the other weapons inspectors who implemented the INF Treaty, you'd be dead. And we know this to be the case because in 1995, Boris Yeltsin was the president of Russia at the time. There was a rocket launch out of Norway. It was an atmospheric test rocket or something of that nature. But when it got launched, it got misread by the Russian early warning as a Trident missile coming in. Now, the Trident missile coming in is on a flat trajectory, is the sign of a preemptive strike. And so they're looking at it, and they called in Yeltsin. They opened up the briefcase, the Russian briefcase, and they said, launch the weapons, Mr. President. You got 5 minutes. Now, Boris Yeltsin's a drunk. So you have an alcoholic with sclerosis suddenly having a briefcase open in front of him, telling me he has to launch now, 5 minutes, or everything's dead. If we don't launch now, they're going to preempt us. We're all going to die. Fortunately, the sclerosis kicked in, and he held off long enough for somebody to say, oh, false alarm. But that's because we had eliminated the Pershing II. Now imagine a situation where you have the Pershing II. There's no time now. He'd have launched and we'd all be dead. So if it weren't for the INF Treaty, we'd all be dead. That's a guarantee. So buy me a beer when you get a chance, although I don't drink beer that much anymore. Buy me a Diet Coke. Some people say that's unhealthy, so convince me to drink tea. I don't know. But, the point is, let's celebrate life. Let's celebrate the fact that we are alive, and we're alive because of arms control. This is important stuff. But then we stopped doing it, and we started replacing it with people who didn't care about it, people who started playing stupid games, all the people that cut their teeth on this. I was the youngest person out there. When I did it, I was one of the youngest people doing it. All the guys, all my colonels, all the generals, all the people I looked up to are dead. Dead. They died. And we didn't train the next generation. We don't have people who believe in arms control. We have people now that view the Russians as weak, that view arms control. Do you remember when I told you? I mean, I'll give you an idea. We were supposed to bring in furniture to implement this living quarters. And we had trains going by, the Russian trains. And they would stop, and the guy would be on the train, and I had looked at the antenna, and I said, they're communicating, they're coordinating the flow of traffic into the factory. And if I can get a hold of that coordination, I can map out the production model that's going on inside the factory. So I got the antenna type, and I went back and I designed a table that we would install a desk table, and I said, how can we make this table pass through the X-ray machines of the KGB and look innocent, but when we assemble it and apply it to a power source, we're now intercepting that traffic. This is how intelligence officers think. And I met people and I designed the table. I had it ready, and we could have built it. And that's when my general told me he would fire me if I ever did that again, if I even thought about that, because it's not what our job was to do. Today, we have people who think that's what our job is. We have people who go into Russia as part of an arms control treaty to spy on Russia. That's all they do. And that's not what the treaties are about. We're not there to use treaties as a vehicle to commit espionage. We're there to use treaties as a vehicle to promote, security and to promote confidence. It really does help. I mean, again, a story from my time as inspector. I didn't trust these people. They didn't trust me. But on New Year's Eve, 1988, I got invited in the home of one of the Russian engineers who was now escorting us and managing the flow of traffic out of the factory so we could do our inspections. And I got invited to his house along with two other inspectors for New Year's Eve. It was a big experiment. And we went. And, there's nothing more intimate in the human experience than going to somebody's home. Just think about that for a second. You guys are at home right now. Look around your house. That's your life. That's your life on display. Everything. And if your home is like my home, it's life on display in an imperfect fashion, meaning we got crap on the desk here. I got stuff piled up here. This home isn't meant to be on Homes and Garden. This is a home that's lived in. And now you go to the Soviet Union. At the time, they didn't live in homes. They lived in apartments. And they put a lot of people into a small space. And so everything is squeezed in. So to invite us into his home was to open up his life to us and say, this is who I am. There was nothing hidden. Everything is there. He introduced us to his wife. He introduced us to his kids. But not only that, he introduced to his neighbors. One of the great things that I've experienced recently was after I wrote the book, I had a lady reach out. She lives in Florida now, and she's a grown adult. But she said, do you remember when you went to the Yefremov's home? I said, yeah. You remember the neighbors that came in? I said, yeah. Do you remember the little girl that came in? Yeah, I'm that little girl. And she read the book and she said, oh, I was there. That was me. I did that. But you got to meet them and see them. And we sat there and we just got to know people and break it down. And halfway through that night, I just had to sit back and go, I don't want to kill these people anymore. I mean, it really was one of those come to Jesus moments where I just sat there, because prior to that, I was still a Marine. I mean, I looked at everything as the threat. Even though the general told me not to, I was a animal. I was on the hunt. I was a lion looking for prey. I was sitting there just looking at everything, saying, one day they're going to tell me to unleash the power of the intelligence community, and I will be ready. I am looking at everything. And then suddenly this awakening went, no, I don't want to kill these people. I don't want to bring harm to these people. What we're doing is so important, because it's not just about this treaty. It's about meeting human beings and realizing that we're the same. They laughed at my bad jokes. I laughed at their bad jokes. We both cry. We both laugh. We both get angry. We're human beings. We left that night and we went out to the Vodkinsk Central Park, Lenin Square. Of course, there is the statue of Lenin. I think he's still there. Vodkinsk is sort of a traditional Soviet era town. But they had put up the tree. It's a New Year's tree. They didn't sell Christmas. They didn't celebrate Christmas at that time. The whole town was there. We're talking midnight. The whole town is there, just talking, singing songs, looking up at the tree, a community. And I went, this has to be preserved. This has to be protected. And it's my duty to protect these people, just like it's my duty to protect the people in the United States. And the vehicle of protection is arms control, disarmament, getting rid of nuclear weapons. It's the most important job I've ever done in my entire life. And then I've watched it get squandered. In 2002, George W. Bush withdrew from the ABM treaty because we had a bunch of insane people that said, well, the Russians aren't that strong anymore. We don't need that treaty. We're going to go ahead and build our missile defense system. And when Vladimir Putin, who was president at that time, but for 2 years, said, if you do that, we can't do this new arms control treaty with you. Sorry. And we're going to have to put our warheads that we took off of our missiles back on our missiles, upload them. You know what the response of the United States was? That's cute. You're so cute, you little Russians. Go ahead, you rascals. Go ahead, put nuclear warheads back on your missiles. Oh, isn't that cute? Because we don't care about you. We're not worried about anything you're doing because you're Russia. We beat you in the Cold War and you're down. And that literally is the response that was given. Not you're cute, but it was, we don't care. Do what you need to do. We're not concerned. Okay, well, that was 2002. In 2016, the United States started to talk about withdrawing from the INF Treaty. And the Russians are like, you don't want to do that. You're already in trouble because of the fact that you got out of the ABM Treaty. They negotiated a new START Treaty in 2009 because the original START Treaty was going to expire. The Russians said, we negotiated the START Treaty on the premise that there was the anti-ballistic missile treaty. So we negotiate on the premise that, we have limitations. We can go low because we don't have to worry about a missile defense shield. We're willing to go low with no defense. Now we've gone low and you're putting a missile defense system in that says we don't have enough now because you have a missile defense system. So if you preempt us and we launch, you're going to kill half of our force. And when we launch, what's going to get hit by your missile defense? And suddenly we're naked. And I've spoken to Anatoly Antonov. He was the chief negotiator of the New START Treaty. He was also later on the ambassador of Russia to the United States. And I asked him about that. He said, we went in and said we have to have a missile defense component to New START. Rose Gutemiller, who was the lead American negotiator, said, we understand what you're saying, but we can't give it to you now because of politics. And you guys, I'm not making it up. There's an intercepted clip of Barack Obama with Dmitry Medvedev in Seoul, Korea, I think in March of 2012, right before Vladimir Putin gets sworn in as president again. And Medvedev brings up missile defense, and Obama turns to him and says, don't worry about it, Dmitry. I can't do it right now because of politics. I got an election coming up. But after the election, we'll sit down, we'll talk. And Medvedev said, okay, I'll pass this on to Putin. Well, we lied, because we had no intention of doing that. We lied to Anatoly Antonov, promising that after they ratified the treaty, we would move on. He picked up the phone and said, I'm ready to move on. They said, that's never going to happen. So we lied. New START was all about a lie. So missile defense is being put in. And now they're talking about withdrawing from the INF Treaty. And so in 2016, Putin meets with a bunch of American journalists and says, you guys have a duty and responsibility, to sort of like wake up your public. If you continue down the path you're going with missile defense and playing games with INF, we're going to have to build new weapons because, we didn't take them seriously because they had nothing but legacy systems from the Soviet era. So we'll have to build a whole generation of new weapons that are designed to defeat any missile defense system you put in. The reporters didn't do anything. So in 2018, Vladimir Putin gives a speech. And that was his famous do you hear me now speech? What's that, Verizon or something? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Well, he's like, can you hear me now? Because I told you that if you continue to behave this way, we will have to build. So today I'm announcing Poseidon, the giant underwater drone that if it blows off the coast, east coast of the United States, we lose all of our cities. Burevestnik, a nuclear-powered cruise missile. Everyone went, oh, sure, right, dude, nuclear-powered cruise missile. Ha. What are you smoking? He said Sarmat, this giant missile with multiple warheads that's so capable it can come at us from the South Pole where we have no defenses. So it just shows up and kills our cities and we didn't even know it happened. Avant-garde, hypersonic maneuvering warheads that can defeat any missile defense shield. He said, are you listening now? And apparently we weren't. And today all of those weapon systems are deployed. And Russia has won the arms race. Just so every American out there understands. The arms race is over. Russia has won. They've lapped us. This is like starting a marathon and leaving the starting block, and your opponent is 16 miles in, running strong, ain't going to stop. You've lost the race. We've lost the arms race. We're not going to catch up. It's over. We can't afford the replacement systems. The Sentinel missile, which is supposed to replace the Minuteman III, which is a missile that goes back to the 1970s, we can't afford it. They've shut it down. We're now been told to extend the Minuteman III not to 2030, but to 2050. The Ohio-class submarine is basically going to start being phased out. It's supposed to be replaced with a new class, the Columbia-class, I think it is, except we can't build submarines. We don't have the shipbuilding capability. This came out when we suckered the Australians into believing that we could provide them with nuclear submarines through the AUKUS thing to get rid of it. Don't buy that French submarine. Buy good American stuff. And the Australians went, okay, mate, put a shrimp on the Barbie. And when are we going to get our submarines? Oh, you'll get them by this date, this date. But to meet the requirement to give the Australians their submarines, we have to be able to produce, I think, 2.7 submarines a year. We have the shipbuilding capacity to produce 1.5. So we're never going to be able to provide the Australians, and the Australians will always be pushed to the end as we try to produce our own submarines. So we're not going to be able to replace the Ohio-class submarine. Bombers, we got the B-52 that we're now going to extend to the B-52J, which means, again, we're going to extend the lifetime of this plane that is older than any of the pilots flying it. I was born in 1961. Some of these bombers were built in the 1950s. They've been upgraded continuously, new engines, new wings, but at some point in time, the age catches up to you. I can tell you about that. Let's talk about arthritis and knees. Age is a thing. Well, airplanes have arthritis too. They call it metal stress, et cetera. We're going to literally fly the wings off of these bombers. We're supposed to replace them with the B-21, but we can't afford the B-21. It's very expensive bomber. And it doesn't even work because let's just say F-35, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. So here we are, the triad, the Sentinel missile, can't do it. The Columbia-class submarine, can't build it. The B-21, can't afford it. But the Russians have built everything. It's there. They're deployed. They're doing it. That puts us in an even more desperate situation now, because now what we have to do is look at what we have and say, how can we maximize the effectiveness? If we can't upgrade our system, how do we alter our posture to get the biggest bang for the buck? And we've already done it. Just so you guys understand, Donald Trump in his first term ordered a complete reworking of the nuclear posture of the United States. That means not just our policy, how we view nuclear weapons, but how we employment, the Nuclear Weapons Employment Plan. This required us, because we were capped at 1,550 deployed nuclear weapons, we had to look at our targeting of this. And the way you maximize potential isn't to do a countervailing, that is, wait for the other side to attack you, and then you ride out the attack and respond and kill everything and guarantee that they'll all die. What we have to do now is launch a preemptive attack. So America has a preemptive nuclear war strategy. It's there. I'm just telling you, it's the truth. But it gets scarier than that, because in November of 2024, Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan, the director of plans for Strategic Command, who is responsible for doing the war plans, he's the guy that did the war plan, is talking to CSIS, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank. In the question and answer period, he was asked, do we think that the Russians are bluffing about their threat of using nuclear war and all that weapons? And he said, it doesn't matter. The Biden administration, this is a quote, the Biden administration is prepared to have a nuclear exchange with Russia today that we will win. So here's the guy that does the war plan telling them that we're ready to fight and win a nuclear war, even though the official policy of the United States is that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore should never be fought. He just straight up said that's not the truth. We're ready to fight and win a nuclear war against Russia. But what he said next, there's two things he said next to wake everybody up. First thing he said is, how do we define victory? He said, victory is defined that when the conflict ends, we retain more nuclear strike capacity than any of our potential competitors. That's victory. And then he said, we might want to be honest with the American people about what victory looks like, because it doesn't look like life in America today. In short, if we have a nuclear war, the constitutional republic ends. We will become a military dictatorship, martial law. The survivors will wish they were dead, and those who survive will understand that everything will be rationed. There will be no freedoms, no freedom of speech, no freedom of assembly, no freedoms at all. We will become a nation of survivors, barely eking it out, every aspect of our life controlled by the government. Now, I'm an American who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. The United States is premised on the notion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We just had a man who wears the uniform of the United States who took the same oath, telling us that our government is prepared to go to nuclear war, where victory is defined by the destruction of the constitutional republic. So don't tell me we go to war to defend the republic. We specifically are saying if we go to nuclear war, we're here to destroy the republic, and we know that going up front. If you're not, puking your guts out right now, you're not an American. But here's the other thing. What does it mean that we retain nuclear strike capacity superior to any of our potential
Opponents?
Opponents, or the people that we might have to fight? It means we have to attack them too. So if we go to war with Russia, we have to attack China. We have to attack North Korea. We have to attack India. We have to eliminate the nuclear strike capacity of all potential competitors, so that when the war ends, what we have left is the most in the world. So there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. None. A nuclear war will always lead to a general exchange. And then some scientists will tell you that nuclear winter will kick in and we'll all die. But it's an experiment I don't want to do. I don't want to find out what the truth is about nuclear winter, because either way, it's not going to be good. And so this is why I say we're on a highway to hell. And now we have a president who is withdrawn from the INF Treaty. Guys, that was my life's work. Again, I tell you, one of the proudest, I haven't convinced my wife to let me do this yet, but I do one on my gravestone. I was the first weapons inspector. Neil Armstrong gets to say I was the first man on the moon. Damn it, I get to say I was the first weapons inspector. But my life work is gone, finished. The New START's finished. There is no treaty. As we speak, the United States is in the process of doing a couple things. We're putting nuclear warheads back on to missiles that we had demerved. Merved is multiple independently retargetable vehicles, basically the number of warheads. You have a Minuteman III designed to have 3 warheads to comply with New START caps. We demerved them, 150 of them permanently. We took the bus off, so it's just a warhead. But on the other ones, we left the bus on. The bus is that which carries the 3, but we took a single warhead on it. But now what we're doing is putting 2 more on there so that we have 3. And so we had 250 Minuteman III with 1 warhead, but now we've put it up. So instead of 250 warheads, we now have 750 warheads. Boom, 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 boom. That gives us more targeting capacity so we can kill more people. And the Pentagon is happy. The war fighters are happy. What we're doing other things too, just to show you how bad we are at the arms control business. New START, one of the ways that you comply with New START was to reduce the ability to deliver weapons. B-52 bombers were counted as one delivery system. So in order to get the numbers down, we had lots of B-52 bombers. We had nuclear capable B-52 bombers that we had to make non-nuclear capable, I think a total of 51. And the treaty calls it to be permanently reversed, meaning you can't use it again. The other thing is on the Ohio-class submarines, each one had 24 launch tubes. Each one could carry a Trident missile. The treaty required us to decommission 4 launch tubes on each submarine. Again, permanent. So we did it, and the Russians went in to do the inspections, and they said, wait a minute, let me get this right. On the B-52, you basically took a wire, cut it, taped it off, put a metal plate there, and you said it's no longer nuclear capable. Yes, that's right. But what happens if you remove the nuclear plate, bring the wires back together, assemble them? It's nuclear capable. Yeah, but we're not going to do that. But this isn't permanent. And we kept telling them, don't worry about it. It is permanent. Congress in 2024, before we got out of the INF or out of the New START treaty, passed a budget that requires the Air Force to be prepared to rapidly recommission the B-52s. And as we speak, the B-52s that were supposed to be permanently disabled as being nuclear capable are being made nuclear capable again. We just lied. The same thing. The Russians looked at the Trident launch tubes and went, this ain't permanent. You guys can bring these back up together in very quick order. And that's the truth.
This is just amazing. The only thing I did promise our audience that we would talk a little bit about Iran and what's going on, and your views on what's happening, or people are just on the edge of their seats. Can you reserve a little bit of time?
I'll switch over to Iran, but you're not going to be happy because it's even worse. again, I'm going to stick with the arms control.
I'm wearing a black dress, you know.
Yeah. Well,
I wasn't expecting a party. I mean, you know,
we should all be in mourning.
It's dire.
Because,
It's dire. It's dire.
It's very dire. You know, this war is ostensibly being fought because we believe that Iran was pursuing a nuclear weapons program, even though the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has testified for Congress last year that Iran isn't pursuing a nuclear weapons program. And everybody who has any common sense, who knows the truth about this, knows that they don't. You mentioned a book called Target Iran. I wrote that book in 2005. I updated it in 2019 with a book called Deal Breaker. It's Target Iran Part 2. And basically, it talks about Donald Trump destroyed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. The Iran nuclear deal is premised on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is the bottom of everything. When we withdrew from New START, what we did is guarantee that Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is dead, because one of the promises inherent in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is that nations who decide that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon and subject themselves to safeguards are being told that the nations that have nuclear weapons are going to get rid of them eventually. That's an obligation under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And as long as we had arms control treaties that brought the numbers down, we were sort of complying with that. We threw away the last treaty and we're building the numbers back up. That means that we have broken our promise under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The other thing is that nuclear armed nations sort of promised that they wouldn't attack non-nuclear states. Here we are in the middle of a war with Iran on false pretense. Now, why is this scary? Well, it's scary for no reason. One, it just manifests the total ignorance we have in the United States about the reality of Iran. To write that first book, Target Iran, I actually went to Iran. I went to Iran during the presidency of Ahmadinejad. And I was shocked by what I saw, because I've been to Middle East dictatorships. I worked in one for a number of years. And Iran is not a Middle East dictatorship. Iran is a thriving democracy. They're actually a more proficient constitutional republic than we are in the United States, because they take their constitution seriously and they take their participation in elections seriously. And so I was shocked by what I saw there, and I was pleasantly so. The Iranian people are deeply cultured. The same experience I had with my Soviet counterparts, I had with the Iranians. Is a wake-up call. These are wonderful people. We shouldn't be going to war with them. We should be, having peace with them, living in peace and prosperity. And we could. It wouldn't be hard to do this. We've accused them of trying to pursue a nuclear weapons program. I won't get into the total history of this, except to say that everything we did was wrong and everything the Iranians did was justified. But when Barack Obama brought the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action forward in 2015, one of the things he noted and said that mitigated in favor of the deal was that the United States finally recognized the importance of a religious fatwa issued by the supreme leader of Iran. It's a constitutional republic, but it's an Islamic republic. They have sort of this separate thing called the supreme leader and the guardian council and the assembly of experts and I think expediency council, all of which work to preserve the Islamic nature of the state. And so religion is very important. And so the supreme leader issues a fatwa, a religious edict, that says that nuclear weapons are haram, forbidden, with Islam, incompatible with Islam. Barack Obama said, we finally recognize the validity of that statement, meaning we believe them when they say that. The author of the fatwa that he was speaking of is Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. Ali Khamenei turned out to be the one guy that was keeping Iran from going nuclear at the more pressure we put on them. In 2024, there was a big push within Iran to develop nuclear weapons capability, because they said we can't trust Israel or the United States because they're planning to attack us. They were right. And they said the only thing that deterred the attack would be nuclear weapons. I remember having this conversation with the president of Iran, the current president, Pezeshkian, and his foreign minister, Araghchi, when they came to New York in September. I was with a handful of other people that got private meeting with the guy. And I asked him straight up about, will Iran declare its ballistic missile capability to be its strategic deterrent capability? And are they going to rely upon their conventional ballistic missiles to provide deterrence? And because we need to know this in the West, otherwise there's people who believe that you're going to build nuclear weapons in secret and that's your deterrence. And he was straight up. We don't want nuclear weapons. We're not pursuing nuclear weapons. We're not going to have nuclear weapons. But then he also said, and we're forbidden from having nuclear weapons, not by international law, but by the fatwa. But at the same time he said that, there were people in Iran that were saying something different. For instance, Revolutionary Guard commanders who were saying that Iran has basically produced a nuclear weapon in everything but the fissile core, meaning that they had a missile that could deliver a nuclear weapon, they had a warhead that could contain a nuclear weapon, and it was all ready to go. All they needed was the fissile core. The fissile core, of course, is the uranium center. Iran had a uranium enrichment program. Parallel with that, Iran had enriched uranium. They need 3.5% uranium to power the Bushehr nuclear reactor, which we're bombing right now. They needed 20% to produce nuclear fuel plates for the Tehran research reactor. But then they went and they up to 60%. Now, it's not illegal. It's not against the law, but there's no reason for them to have 60%. And 60% is 1 or 2 enrichment cycles away from having fissile material. 92, 94% necessary for a nuclear bomb. And they did this. They claimed they did it for leverage. I asked the question there, too. And they said, we didn't do it to produce a bomb. We did it so that we'd have negotiating leverage because nobody was taking this seriously at the negotiating table. If we could sit down and come up with a way to get rid of the 60%, then we could get, we have something to give away and they have to give us something. It was a ploy for negotiation. But there were people in Iran who said, no, we need to build nuclear bombs. And 450 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride has the capacity to build between 5 and 11 nuclear bombs of about 15 to 20 kilotons each. And they said, we need to do this. We need to finalize this final step. But you had the religious part. And so there were clerics, senior clerics, who talked with Ali Khamenei, and they came up with the following, that the fatwa still stands, but that the fatwa is reversible under certain conditions. And those conditions are when the Islamic Republic is placed in existential threat of its survival. When people are actively trying to eliminate that or even threaten us with nuclear weapons, the fatwa no longer applies. The fatwa was in place up until the moment that Ali Khamenei was assassinated by Israel at the start of this war. They killed the one man who was preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapons capability. Constitutionally, Iran has to respond. First of all,
Scott, we've run out of time. We can still continue in our video, but we have to close out the live show for WBAI radio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just no. It's amazing hearing this. This whole history. I'm sure Jeremy's going to recommend that his students read your books because this is something that isn't really taught. So I just want to say, I want to give you the opportunity to tell our audience how they can follow your work. Could you just please let us know what's the best place, Substack or Twitter, X?
If you go to scottritter.com, it'll take you to my Substack page. And on my Substack page, there's links to my Twitter account, to my Telegram account, and to all the articles and podcasts that I do. I'll just make a real quick pitch. There's also a link to a donation page. I can't get into the details right now. I am traveling to Russia at the end of the month. And Russia has a long history of learning how to peacefully coexist with Muslim populations. They had the Chechen conflict. They have the issues of the attempted breakaway of the Tatar Republic, the Bashkir Republic. And so the concept of Christianity and Islam being inherently incompatible has been proven wrong by Russia. When I planned this trip, we planned to have a long, detailed conversation about how Russia's experience with Islam could be useful in resolving conflicts between Christians and Muslims. After they agreed to this, then this war broke out. And I've been approached by the people that I'm going to be working with. They said, this stopped being theoretical. It's now real. This project is very, very important. And it's a project that I'm an independent journalist, bringing Garland Nixon with me. But we pay our own way. We legally, we don't have to. Legally, we could take the first-class business tickets that have been offered. We could stay in the five-star hotels, and we could eat the finest food because there is a general license agreement that allows journalists to do things even in sanctioned environment. But Garland and I are not going to open the door for people criticizing and saying that we're working for the other side. We work for ourselves. We're American journalists. We pay for everything. When I say we pay for everything, you pay for everything, because we can't do this without donations. Neither one of us are independently wealthy. So if you like what I'm doing, please donate. And if you really like what I'm doing, please subscribe, because that's how I pay my bills. But I don't require it. The thing is, when you come to scottritter.com, if you don't have any money, you're not denied anything. It's all there laid out for you to do it. So anyways, that's how they can do it. But I just want to say that if you like the work we're doing, it only happens because people provide donations. So I can promise you that anything you donate will be used properly in support of the cause, and not frivolously.
Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. We'd like to thank Scott Ritter for appearing here today. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Now, Scott, we're still live. We're just not recording for the radio
anymore, right? Because we're on YouTube.
You can say whatever you want.
I'm joking. Of course, I'm not going to swear.
I tell all our guests, just don't take.
I wish I had a better grasp of the time. I could have managed the time better. So I apologize for that.
What you were saying was fascinating. I did have a couple of things that I wanted to ask you and have you discuss. And they're carpet bombing.
Can I just make one final point though before
go ahead.
This is an important point. They have to form this 3-person committee as an interim measure. They killed Ali Khamenei, the guy who stops a nuclear bomb. So the president of Iran, who doesn't want a nuclear bomb, said he doesn't want a nuclear bomb, brings in the head of judiciary, who's one of the is Islamist jurist, and then they bring in a person nominated by the Guardian Council, a senior cleric. The guy they brought in is the guy that believes Iran should have a nuclear bomb. So please listen to what I just said. We killed the guy who didn't want a nuclear bomb, and we've empowered the guy who wants a nuclear bomb, as we are seeking to existentially destroy the Islamic Republic. I believe that Iran is going to build a nuclear weapon, and I believe there's nothing we could do to stop it. I believe that if we continue to push this issue, Israel will disappear. Now, there might be some people out there who believe that that is just reward for Israel's genocidal behavior in Gaza. I don't believe any nuclear weapon should ever be used under any circumstance, because I believe there's no such thing as a limited nuclear exchange. And if Iran uses nuclear weapons against Israel, the United States will use nuclear weapons against Iran. Russia may respond, China may respond, and then we're all dead.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You can't. And so this is, again, why it's so important for we the people to start getting active, because we need to bring this war to a controlled end. I'm going to do what I can. There's things that I'm going to try and get done to start triggering diplomacy, using multiple vectors, and focusing on the role of Islam, because it is an Islamic republic. By the way, they take this very seriously. But we need to do our part as well. We need to disenfranchise the warmongers, and we need to do that politically. We need to put this president on notice that he will lose the vote in November, no matter what. And he won't lose it in a way that just becomes inconvenient. He will lose it in a way that could lead to his impeachment and conviction. He needs to stop this war. If we don't stop this war, if we allow this to continue, I just tried to tell you, this is why it's important. The guy who wants nuclear weapons is now empowered. And we've created the conditions where religiously the fatwa can be overridden. The guy who wrote the fatwa is not there to defend the fatwa anymore. He's dead. We killed him. Iran will build a nuclear weapon. Welcome to the new world. Now the question is, how do we prevent Iran from using that nuclear weapon?
One thing that I was just watching, watched a little bit of Fox News before the broadcast, and it's amazing how little news you get from the conventional media. And, a couple of things that I would just like you to comment on, and these are things that you've discussed in your books, is that destabilizing Iran will destabilize the whole Middle East. And what we're seeing right now is the carpet bombing of Tehran. The carpet bombing of Tehran. And if you look at Tehran, it is approximately the same population density as New York City. So imagine that, audience, please. They are bombing the equivalent of New York City. And with carpet bombs, that means constant bombardment. So, I mean, we are giving them, not only have we killed their leaders, not only have we bombed their facilities and military installations and things like that, but we are literally bombing everything, hospitals, schools. And this is not on the news. You're not getting this. And the other thing I just want to, and I just say, other thing I wanted to bring up is right now there is an evacuation going on in the Mideast for about 1 million Americans in the Mideast, all over. This is the biggest evacuation that we have ever seen. And I was researching other evacuations that have gone on, and they were talking about 15,000 Americans in the Lebanon evacuation, Gulf War. Again, we've never seen this kind of thing. So what Scott was telling us, and has been telling us for many years, is that destabilizing Iran is destabilizing the world. So please, Scott, go ahead. Well, curse if you want.
Damn it. No, let's talk about the evacuation first. Let me tell you what defeat looks like, because we're going to lose this war. So either we die in a nuclear holocaust, because you can't stop a nuclear war once it begins, or we have to acknowledge that the day of American hegemony in the Middle East is over. The hegemony that began when Franklin Roosevelt met with the head of the Saud family during World War II, where they negotiated the deal with the devil. We provide security, they provide oil. A posture that was even ratcheted up more with the Carter Doctrine, 1979, where the United States guaranteed that we would forward deploy military forces into the region. This led to the creation of the Rapid Deployment Force that became the United States Central Command, which is the military forces there today. It led to the Gulf War of 1991. It's led to multiple military conflicts ever since then, and it's what brought us to this current conflict with Iran. We have military installations throughout the region. The importance of these installations is founded in who's more important when it comes to the Middle East from an American representational standpoint. The American ambassador to different nations, or the central command representative. And the bottom line is the lead person in almost every diplomatic engagement with the Middle East is the military representative. We lead with central command. We lead with the war fighters. We are geared in the Middle East to fight wars. That's what we do. We don't promote peace. We promote arms sales, and we promote chaos. We promote anarchy to create justification for continued military presence. Iran has been calling this out. They've been telling their Gulf Arab neighbors, you have to understand that if you give safe haven to the people who are talking about attacking us, then you are going to be held responsible for this. And nobody listened, because I think everybody believed that the United States' power was supreme. But now we have a situation where, again, I know there's cheerleaders out there cheering the fact that we sunk a ship that represented a threat to nobody, cheering the fact that we're blowing up buildings. Understand those buildings are empty. They've been empty for some time now, and we're just blowing up buildings and killing civilians. We're not having any meaningful impact on the real security infrastructure of Iran. But the Iranians are responding using a game plan that's been 20 years in the making. Back when Dick Cheney, when he was vice president under George W. Bush, he threatened the invasion of Iran back in 2005. And since that time, Iran has broken their country up into 12 autonomous military districts, and each one of those military districts has been prepared for this very moment. They have war plans. They have the means to wage this war, and they can wage this war for months. And that's what they're doing. They have a plan. We don't. We went with a plan that said, kill Ali Khamenei, and the regime will collapse, and peace will break out, and we win. That plan changed after day one, when we realized that the Iranians were actually hitting everything. We didn't expect them to do that because we never listened. You heard the trumpet. We were taken by surprise when they started attacking all of our facilities. Really? What planet have you lived on? That was known to everybody because the Iranians said that's what they were going to do, but we didn't trust them. Now we have a situation where they're literally shutting down energy production in the Middle East. If you're Europeans, you're screwed. Can I say that? I won't say the other word, but you're screwed. you need natural gas. And because you stupidly cut yourself off of Russian energy, you're now dependent upon non-Russian energy. You can buy it from the Middle East, but you also get it from the United States. We've stepped in, but our gas costs you 5 times as much, sometimes more than that.
There's a quote by Colonel Douglas McGregor I'd like to read. It made me laugh. It's perverse. So if our goal was to enrich Russia, make it stronger and more effective, gosh, I think we've managed that.
No, but also if our goal is to destroy Europe, because what happened is the Iranians began attacking the gas liquefaction plant in Qatar, one of the largest producers of natural gas in the world, and a major supplier of Europe and the rest of the world. As a result, the Qataris have shut down this liquefaction plant. Once you shut it down, it doesn't just start up. There's a process involved, which means that you are looking at months of gas disruption, months of minimum. Iran may not just sit back and say shutting it down is enough. They may level it, which means you're never going to get that liquefaction back up and running. Where are you going to get your gas? Now, there's the MAGA chest-thumping air breathers that say, America will sell it to them. We don't have that kind of excess capacity. We don't. And Russia's definitely not going to sell it to Europe. So Europe's in a lot of trouble right now. We are literally looking at the potential for the total economic collapse of Europe. And again, like Israel and Gaza, I just don't have any sympathy for the Europeans today, because this is a self-inflicted wound done to people who have long since lost any semblance of moral authority and legitimacy, not just with what they're doing with Ukraine, but in general. They stand for nothing. So that's the direction we're heading. Meanwhile, Russia, Vladimir Putin the other day, he's had a worried look on his face for some time now, because the sanctions have bit. And so Russia has to make adjustments, and some of these adjustments are painful. Doesn't mean they're collapsing, it means they're adjusting. And the Russians are very good at adjusting. But I saw a twinkle in his eye the other day as he talked to a reporter. And he said, gosh, because what he was talking about is that the Ukrainians blew up a Russian gas carrier in the Mediterranean. Now, one would think that he would have a sour face, pounding the table, blah, blah. He's like, it seems to me that Europe doesn't want our gas. They're actively moving to shut it down completely by 2027, 2028. So there's probably no reason for us to keep selling them gas today. There's other people out there that want our gas. So I have a feeling that we're probably going to stop selling to Europe and start selling to these new emerging markets and develop market share. But he's twinkling his eye. Oil. Russia already provides steep discounts. So the people, there are other nations out there. I can guarantee you, when Brent goes through the roof, the other suppliers aren't going, hey, India, don't worry about it. We understand your economy is a little fragile right now and you can't afford to pay $110 a barrel. We'll keep the price low. No, they're like, India, $110 a barrel, baby. Come on, money, 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 money. You think Chevron's going to sit there and say, nah, cut our profits? No. American oil companies, max, max, max. Russia has been doing steep discounts because they want to keep the market open to them. But now the price going through the roof, Russia just has to increase a little bit to keep the discounts. We just solved Russia's budget issues. All the issues that Russia was having about cash flow, about this, about that, is gone out the window. A couple months of oil prices at this level, and trust me, they're going to be at this level or higher. And we've balanced the Russian budget. We've paid for the war. We're the dumbest people on the planet. The United States of America is governed by literally the dumbest people on the planet because we don't understand anything about this planet. We just have Pete Hegseth telling us how we can bench press 315 pounds and use a bunch of superlatives to describe mass murder. Because as you pointed out, all we're doing, again, for those people who live in New York City, go out and walk around Turtle Bay, the neighborhood. I used to live in the Turtle Bay neighborhood, loved it. And now imagine the Turtle Bay neighborhood has been flattened overnight. Flattened, literally flattened. So that's all right. We're going to go to Soho. No, Soho got flattened the night before. Oh, well, we'll go to Hell's Kitchen. No, it's gone. All the neighborhoods of New York City that define New York City, make New York City a place to live, You can, Brooklyn Heights. You can go across the river into Queens, and Forest Hills, gone. Where they play the U.S. Open? You know what we did last night? We blew up Azadi Stadium, the big soccer stadium where they play soccer match. We blew it up because we're just sons of bitches, because we're cruel, we're inhuman, we're the worst people on the planet. We blew it up not because it serves any useful purpose. We just blew it up because we're going to blow it up because Israel is going to carry out the Daiwa Doctrine. The Daiwa Doctrine is named after a suburb of Beirut, a southern suburb of Beirut where there's primarily a Shia population. And the Israelis decided that the way they break Hezbollah isn't by defeating Hezbollah, because they can't. Oh, just a little side note, Hezbollah is slaughtering Israeli troops in southern Lebanon right now, slaughtering them, wiping them off the map, because Israeli troops can't stand toe-to-toe against real soldiers. They face a real army, and they get beat every single time. And that's what's happening. But now we come back to Daiwa. The way that they break the will of the Lebanese to resist is to slaughter the Lebanese civilians, to do collective punishment. Again, a war crime, but nobody cares because Israel apparently can do anything they want, never pay any price, because the United States defends them against everything, because Israel controls American foreign policy. Israel dictates national security policy. We're at war in Iran today because of Israel, and only because of Israel. There's no other way to say this. There's nothing about this war that benefits the United States of America. Everything about this war undermines everything we stand for, both in terms of ethics, but also in terms of national security strategy. Even if you don't believe in Donald Trump, understand he published a strategy document, the National Security Strategy, published in November, and everything about this war undermines the totality of that document. Everything in this war undermines the totality of that document. Everything Donald Trump campaigned on, the promise to be the peace president, is out the window. He's a liar. He's a cult of personality. He's destroying American democracy, and he's destroying the world. But now we get to
people are. I just want to jump in there. People are saying, "All right, well, let's impeach him." Well, what do we get next? We get J.D. Vance. We get Peter Thiel's protege.
Well, if we
you think there's going to be you think there would be an improvement, or do you think that Trump is a function of whatever the people behind him who are pulling the strings are telling him to do?
Trump has surrounded himself with the most pro-Zionist cabinet in the history of the United States of America. And there's a reason why he did that. Now, I don't want to get too far down the Epstein rabbit hole because I'm not equipped to talk about that. You can bring on Ryan Dawson if you want to talk about that. He's smarter than I am about that issue, but there's something there. There's something about this process of corrupting American politicians in order to have the ability to co-opt them. It's real. It's not fake. And Donald Trump is the living manifestation of that. Look, I'll just give a little war story because people are like, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about. F you. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Because at one point in time, I was heavily recruited to be a member of Congress. Jack Kemp, who ran the Republican congressional recruitment team back in 1998, 1999, personally called me up and organized a major fundraiser in Westchester. They were ready to write the money. I was going to be a member of Congress come the 2000 cycle. They had the seat picked out, the whole thing. I just refused to answer the questions the way they wanted me to answer questions about abortion and guns control, and that disqualified me. But I was a voice that needed to be controlled. I was in Washington, D.C. I was knocking on doors in the Senate and the House to try and influence the upcoming war with Iraq. I was a very influential voice back then. I had gone to the Senate offices of a very prominent Christian man. And when I walked in, I thought I was walking into a brothel because his entire staff was composed of young college-age girls who were very well endowed, very shapely, and were wearing costumes, uniforms designed to enhance that aspect of them. Very friendly girls. I was so taken aback that I asked the chief of staff, what the hell is going on here? He said, no. These are the daughters of constituents, and he's giving them an opportunity to intern in Washington, D.C. And I said, well, good Lord, what's in the water down there? Because, everybody should be drinking this. But that's okay. We did our meetings. I went back to my hotel room, and I got a phone call from somebody who was in the right position. And he said, Scott, before that, I got a phone call from one of these girls because they hand out their little business cards. I'm in the hotel room and I get the call. Scott, this is Krista. We met today in Senator so-and-so's office. I said, oh, hey, Krista, how you doing? Yeah, me and the others, we're getting together for a party afterwards. And we were just wondering, maybe you'd like to come. I mean, we all liked you. We thought you were pretty funny. And we'd just like to continue the conversation. And and she mentioned the party. And I'm like, I don't know, it's late. I'll think about it. Hung up the phone. And I get the phone call from this other person. I said, did you get a phone call asking you to go to a party? I said, yeah. He said, Scott, I'm your friend. I've been your friend for a long time. When we hang up the phone here, check out of the hotel, go to the airport, get on an airplane, and leave Washington, D.C. right now. I said, why? I'm not going. He said, no, Scott. The party's going to come to you. Okay, if you don't go to the party's coming to you. They're going to knock on your hotel room. They're going to be there, and there will be photographs taken, and it's the end of you. You will never survive this. Leave now. And I left. Therefore, I'm not on any Epstein list, any of those other lists. I avoided the compromise. Washington, D.C. is about sexual compromise, 100%. And if you work in Washington, D.C., you've been sexually compromised. Every single one of them has been sexually compromised. That's a promise. That's a guarantee because I was there and I watch how it happens. They can pretend that it hasn't. They can deny it. Somebody somewhere's got videotape and photographs of them in a sexually compromised position. It may not be illegal, but if you're somebody who says, I'm happily married, I love my wife, I love my children, and suddenly they have a videotape of you and three nubile college co-eds going at it like nobody's ever gone at it before in life, suddenly your marriage isn't as important as you thought it was, is it? You don't want that imagery out there unless you're somebody who doesn't care, and then you ask for additional copies and you become an OnlyFans, open up your OnlyFans page. But I'm not in the OnlyFans business, so I avoided having those videotapes made. But they're there. It's real. And I believe that the Israelis run this, and they do it to control Washington, D.C., and they have effective control over Washington, D.C., and I think that's reflected in the policies of the Trump administration. Somebody asked the question, who do you think's really pulling the strings? It's Israel. Israel. And I apologize if I'm offending you, Gloria, or you, Jayme. It's just my take on it. We don't need to go much further because I don't want the YouTube channel brought down over charges of anti-Semitism. I'm not anti-Semitic, just so people understand. I'm probably one of the few people that can say that, during the Gulf War, my job was to prevent missiles from landing on Israel. So anybody who calls me anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, you have no idea what you're talking about. Myself and other people put our lives on the line to stop missiles from landing against Israel. As a weapons inspector from 1994 to 1998, I traveled to Israel repeatedly. Why? Because I approached the Israeli government and said the only way you'll ever be secure, because, again, just to back it up, when the Gulf War ended, the decision was made in the Israeli government that the only way that they could preserve peace was to assassinate Saddam Hussein. And they began a plan to do just that. In 1993, October 1993, or early November 1993, Sariyat Matkal, their special forces, their Delta Force, was carrying out an exercise, actually on the soil of Gaza, because they had a strip where they actually did their work. And it went bad. And they killed a bunch of Sariyat Matkal, and it got exposed, and they had to cancel it. But they went into planning and said, how can we kill? We have to kill this guy. We have to kill Saddam. That's the only way to resolve it. 1994, a year later, I traveled to Israel, and I met with Yuri Sagai, the man who built the assassination plan. And I said, Yuri, that's not the solution. The solution is me. The solution is the UN weapons inspectors. You're sitting on intelligence information about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program. If we find Iraq to be in compliance, you're going to slide that information under the doors of policymakers around the world, undermining my work. I need you to give me that information, and I need you to trust me to investigate this information. I need you to trust me that I'm going to go into Iraq and I'm going to do a really damn good job of following through so I can come back to you and tell you either your information's right or wrong and how we've resolved it. It's the only way out of this. When I first gave that pitch to Yuri Sergey, his jaw dropped. I mean, they had to call timeout and actually leave because they didn't understand what the hell was happening.
I have a quote from Professor Michelle Chodovsky from Global Research. Israel is an instrument of the Pentagon. Netanyahu is a proxy. Israel does not act without the consent of U.S. NATO. And from what I understand, which is pretty limited compared to you, is that there seems to be this money laundering situation that goes on. we give money to Israel. When I say we, the United States gives money to Israel. Israel then turns around and funds Congress and Senate and various programs that oversee us, the United States, and then it kind of goes back. So it's kind of this circle. And, with the situation in Gaza, the United States is supplying money and weapons, but yet the protesters are pointed at Israel and Netanyahu and saying, stop doing this, but they're not looking at the United States and say, stop funding this. So it seems like, kind of like a circular relationship.
Well,
what
it
are your
is a
thoughts?
circular relationship. I mean, there's no doubt that it's a circular relationship, but it's not one where, okay, now we're getting into layers of complexity. It's too simple to say Israel controls the United States. That's too simple. What is more accurate, and is going to get me in more trouble, is to say that there is an element in American Christian Zionists and American Jewry, not Jews. I'm not saying Jews. I'm saying Americans who are Jewish and who believe in using Zionism. Let me back this up. You guys do know that when Theodore Herzl was looking at getting a homeland for the Jewish people, that in addition to Palestine, they had a plan B, and that was Patagonia. This is a statement of fact. They were looking at Argentina. So any notion that Israel is biblical in nature, that this whole Zionist enterprise is about the biblical legacy, that's just made up crap that came afterwards. It's about finding a plot of land where the Zionists can do their business. Israel is a tool used by certain power structures in the United States to empower themselves, to make themselves more powerful.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah, but those power structures use Zionism, both in terms of the purest Jewish application of it, Greater Israel, but also Christian Zionism. They exploit the end of days, rapture, Armageddon aspect of it. But it's an empowerment vehicle here in the United States of people to empower themselves. So, but that's outside the framework of the Pentagon. I mean, it's not right to say the Pentagon does. The Pentagon is run by generals and civilians who are temporary political appointees. What we're talking about here is a deep state. We're talking about here is a permanent establishment of unelected officials who have over time been hijacked by. There was a time in the 1970s where this Zionistic cabal didn't control the United States to the degree they do now. If you went to the State Department, if you went to the Pentagon, you had this class of people called the Arabists, because oil was very important. And the Arabists were there. And I remember the struggles that were taking place between the Arabists and the Zionists, and the Arabists would often win. When I was doing the Gulf War, there was many times when the Zionists were put down. I mean, the irony is one of the people that put down the Zionist ambitions was Paul Wolfowitz, who later on went to be one of the architects of one of the ultimate pro-Zionist movements. But at the time, he worked for a president who wasn't completely controlled by the pro-Israeli crowd. A president who, George Herbert Walker Bush, whatever you think of him, he wasn't controlled by them. He actually told them to pound sand on several occasions. Bill Clinton was controlled by them because Bill Clinton was a man who his personal sexual appetites led him to be compromised. That's just a statement of fact. And then he empowered the deep state so that when George W. Bush became president, who was not sexually compromised by these people, but he now had to pay attention to the empowered deep state. And the empowered deep state hijacked important parts of his legacy, to include using 9/11 as a vehicle to go to war against, 5 nations in 5 years, or 7 nations in 7 years. And just on and on and on and on. So I guess
I
thing
think
is, it's too simplistic to say that Israel's pulling the strings. The right way to say it is that a cabal in the United States that uses Israel is pulling the strings.
One of the things that I think you brought up, and I think that's probably how Professor Chudovsky thinks of it. There was a time when generals and colonels, in the Pentagon were, like you're saying, were focused on peace and ways of preserving their their soldiers and their sailors and things like that. And this, anyone who has that consciousness now is demoted or retired, and the people that are promoted are a very different breed, and they're very much more in the military industrial complex. So we've lost, I think, and this is, based on some of your discussion and your reports, we've lost some of the integrity of our military commanders.
Yeah.
And it's a different crowd than it was, let's say when John F. Kennedy was president.
The military's job is to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. My job isn't peace. When I joined the Marine Corps, my job isn't peace. That's the politician's job. My job is to kill. My job is to be the best trained killer you've ever seen in your life. My job is to be in a basement being fed red meat, so that when you unlock the basement, you unleash me, I go out and I destroy everything in my path. That's the job of the military. Let's not pretend otherwise. But we need politicians to control that. Now, the military's job is to be apolitical. I just sit there and growl and I wait for blood. And hopefully the ideal career is I spend 20 years in the basement waiting for blood that never comes, because the politicians are smart enough to say, we don't want to unleash the beast. But the beast has to be ready to eat. The beast has to be prepared to eat all the time. So we train and train and train and train. And that's the job of the military, to train, so that when the politicians come and say, we need you to do X, Y, and Z, you go, got it, sir. Wait, check. Is it proportional? Has Congress weighed in? Because we took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so we have to ensure everything we do is constitutional. But after we check it off, it doesn't matter. Again, I've told the story before. When Major General Matt Caulfield called me in, pulled me out of the amphibious warfare school to be on this planning cell working for Commandant of the Marine Corps, Al Gray, we were talking about Iraq and why we were going to war. And I told him, I said, sir, we're fighting the wrong Arabs. I said, the Iraqis are actually pretty cool people. When you want to dig a ditch in Iraq, the Iraqis dig the ditch. We're going to war on behalf of Kuwait, who will never dig a ditch. These are a bunch of fat, effeminate, ridiculously over wealthy idiots who hate us, and they don't do any work. They hire other people to come in and dig their ditches for them. And the same thing with the Saudis. We're fighting the wrong Arabs. We should actually turn our military around and slaughter all these people and let the Iraqis rule the area, because then we'll have people that have a work ethic. And he went, are you sure you're the right guy for this job? Because we're getting ready to go to war with Iraq. I said, sir, you asked me a question. I gave you my answer, but I'm a professional. If you tell me to prepare for war with Iraq, I will prepare for war with Iraq. That's my job. That's my duty. That's my responsibility. And I did just that. And I actually participated in the war against Iraq. I didn't pull any punches. I was given a lawful order. I executed those lawful orders. But the point is, we had a military that was capable of this kind of nuanced thinking. The same approach that I talk about with arms control. We had people who were experts on the Soviet Union who were prepared to go to war with the Soviet Union, but they're also prepared to have peace with the Soviet Union.
So what do we got now?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. At the end of the Gulf War, Bill Clinton became president. And what happened is Bill Clinton was surrounded by a bunch of progressive ideologues who looked at the military, because remember, one of the things that George Herbert Walker Bush ran on was his victory in Desert Storm. That was supposed to carry him through the election, this great victory. And so Bill Clinton had to spend a lot of time focused on why that wasn't a great victory, and all this. And so that builds up resentment. So when Bill Clinton became president, he looked at the general officers and he didn't see an apolitical military force ready to do his bidding. He saw a politicized military force that had been conditioned by 8 years of Ronald Reagan and 4 years of George Herbert Walker Bush. And we saw this. Remember when Barry McCafferty was supposed to be appointed the drug czar? And now people in the White House, young 20-something staffers, denigrated him and attacked him and spoke ill of him behind his back. And so what happened is Bill Clinton began the purging of the military and replacing senior officers who he deemed to be not loyal to him with people he deemed to be loyal. There became a political litmus test that never before existed. Before, your job was, can you kill the enemy effectively? If the answer was yes, you got the job. Now it is, will you do what's right for me politically? Because the military's job isn't to do anything that's right for anybody politically. We just obey lawful orders. If you want something, get your State Department to do it. You want people killed? I'll do it.
So right now, we do not have lawful orders. We do not have the congressional approval to be carpet bombing Iraq.
We don't have
Iran.
anything right now. We also have an amoral military. What also happened is once you began politicizing the general ranks, that drops down to the first command position of importance in your career on your way to be a general officer's battalion command or squadron command, the lieutenant colonel level. It used to be if you're going to go to a lieutenant colonel board, they're looking at your tactical proficiency, your professional knowledge, your integrity. Do you look good in uniform? Because leadership is about looking good in uniform. We don't want fat people leading our warriors. I'm just being real here. I'm not sugarcoating it. Instead, they were
camera ready people.
Yeah, and now, well, I mean, when looking good in uniform wasn't for cameras, because when you look good, it means you're physically fit and you can survive on the battlefield and kill the enemy. We weren't looking for models; we were just looking for warriors. But now you have to pass a political litmus test. What's your feeling on DEI? What's your feeling on homosexuals in the military? What's your feeling on this? What's your feeling on that? And these are questions that the military guy says, that's not my business. You solve those problems. When Congress decides they want to have don't ask, don't tell, that's a congressional decision that's then passed to me in the form of a lawful order, and I implement your policy. My job isn't to make that kind of policy for you, and yet we turn the military into a reflection of American society. It's not. The military is not meant to be a mirror of American society. The military is a standalone entity designed to kill people. And if it's not killing people, it's not prepared to kill people, it doesn't deserve to exist. We're not here to hold hands, sing kumbaya, and promote any social programs. That's the job of Congress. That's the job of the American people. If you want the military to do something, pass a law, give the order, and the military will execute the order. But we now made politics conditional to promotion. And once you become politicized, it then works up the chain of command. The other thing we did is we've loosened up, the military used to do everything. And then we got into the Cold War and we had to, save money. And so we started, farming out military responsibilities to civilian contractors. When I was a weapons inspector, I was sort of shocked that I thought we'd have a team of a bunch of military guys, but no, we had a core of military officers. And then we had civilian contractors, huge technical services company that provided, 25 to 28 technicians to implement. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's the Department of Defense on-site inspection agency, but the majority of the people on the ground doing this are civilians. And here's what happened too. I'm not picking on anybody, but a lot of the officers got involved in the contracting business, and then they'd retire and they'd go work as contractors. You have this revolving door. And this happened too. I saw this with arms control. I was the counterintelligence officer doing START treaty planning in the greater Magna, Utah area, which means I dealt with Hercules, the plant that produced solid rocket motors. I went up to Morton Thiokol. They produced things. I went to Hill Air Force Base. And what you saw there was an overwhelming presence of civilian contractors, defense industry. And you saw the relationship between the military and defense industry, and it was a revolving door. It's about money. And so as we started to take away war fighting, we said that officers have to be well-rounded. They need joint experience, they need to get out there. And so in order to become a general officer, you had to do a tour related to defense industry. You had to learn how to balance. And once you did that, most people can't survive that because you get addicted to the concept of money. You're reminded that eventually you will retire, and you will retire at middle class status, maybe upper middle class, but that's it. You'll never be rich. You're never going to be a general again. People aren't going to follow.
Co-optation.
100%. And so you want to get on the board, but to get on the board, you have to do favors for the defense industry. You have to make contracts happen that otherwise wouldn't happen. It's a corruption of the system. So today, if you're a general officer, you have you've been compromised. There are several layers of compromise that have happened, and you're afraid to stand up. There used to be generals that, a legendary general was one of the last commanders of the 7th Marine Amphibious Brigade. He's a man who had been arrested 3 times for fighting, for drunkenness. He marched a battalion to a bar in Southern California because one of the Marines got rolled by a bar girl. And he shut the door and they took the bar apart. He got arrested. He punched a guy out on the beach for interfering with his ability to command. He got arrested. The man was a legend. They kept promoting him because he was a warrior, because he was good at killing. He would never get promoted today. He wouldn't get past the lieutenant colonel board. The Marine Corps had a lieutenant colonel in Okinawa that was getting ready to take his battalion into harm's way, and he gave a speech. And he made use of a term that used to be used all the time. Don't be, and he used the term. It implies don't be less than the men you are. It wasn't meant to be derogatory and all that. It was just the way warriors speak in the company of warriors. Somebody turned him in, showed the video, he got fired. One of the most combat capable Marine lieutenant colonels who would have gone on to have a star got fired. We got rid of him because we have to be politically correct. Our military today is politically correct. And when you're politically correct, you're not going to tell the politicians no. Right now, every general officer, every admiral should be resigning over this war. This is an illegal war of aggression. And just so the audience understands what that means, Justice Jackson, went on to become a Supreme Court justice. He was the lead prosecutor of the American side in Nuremberg, said that an illegal war of aggression is not just a war crime, but the greatest war crime of them all, because from that, all other war crimes are perpetrated. The United States today is committing illegal war of aggression. We don't have the authority under international law. And again, for all the people out there who say, well, we don't need international, we're Americans. Okay, geniuses, do we need the Constitution? Can we agree that we need the Constitution? I just need to know that, because if you say we don't, then you're not an American. I don't want to have a conversation with you about what it means to be an American. So we agree that the Constitution is absolute, that we have to adhere to the Constitution. Are you familiar with the supremacy clause of the Constitution? If you're not, reread the Constitution. Again, I think most Americans aren't familiar with it, so read the Constitution. It's sort of important if you're an American. Well, the supremacy clause has a number of things, but one of the things is that if the United States, the president, signs a treaty, and then that treaty is ratified by the United States Senate, it becomes the supreme law of the land, non-negotiable, the supreme law of the land. The Supreme Court has found this over and over and over again. So we are signatories to the United Nations Charter, and the United Nations Charter has been ratified by the Senate. It is the supreme law of the land, which means that under not just international law, but now constitutional law, we can't go to war unless it's done in legitimate self-defense. If you're going to, either you need a Chapter 7 resolution passed by the Security Council, which authorizes military force to deal with an inherent threat to international peace and security. That's what we went to war in Desert Storm with. That's what I went to war with. For all the people that call me a warmonger and all that, F you. I'm not a warmonger. I went to war with the full legal authority of the international community and of the United States Congress, who passed a war powers resolution a few days before we began the war. I had the authority of the Constitution and of the United Nations Charter behind me. You may not agree with that war, that's your prerogative. You may disagree with everything I did in that war, that's your prerogative. But if you dare call me a war criminal, if you dare say that I went to war without legal authority, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. It's important. Now, one other way that we can go to war is self-defense, Article 51. But self-defense requires imminent threat. And to qualify as an imminent threat, there's certain thresholds that have to be met. Iran posed no imminent threat to anybody. If you want to say their nuclear weapon posed an imminent threat, you're wrong. Because why? Because we had engaged in diplomacy and we were mitigating that imminent threat. We actually had a deal negotiated, which would have taken the Iranians down to zero enrichment, verifiable, inspectors on the ground, including U.S. inspectors, something the Iranians had never allowed. But it was perfidy. We weren't serious about diplomacy. Perfidy, oh, that's a war crime, by the way. You guys might want to look it up. Perfidy is when you actually offer the white flag of truce, and then they come in under the white flag of truce, and then you attack them. We've done it not once, but twice. December 7th, how many people celebrate Pearl Harbor Day, bow their head, and talk about the day that will live on in infamy, the day that the Japanese carried out a surprise attack against American forces in Pearl Harbor? And we've condemned the Japanese ever since. I remember my grandmother, when my parents were stationed in Hawaii, my grandmother came to visit us, and we took her to the Pearl Harbor Memorial because she was a lady who lived during World War II. Her friends, her relatives went to fight and die in that war. And we were there, and she was a little hard of hearing. And we took her to Pearl Harbor Memorial, and at that time, a lot of Japanese tourists came in to sort of pay, it's like paying penance. And so we're in line, and she looks around, and she goes, "Why are there so many Japs here?" We're like, Grandma, I can't say that. I can't say that. She hated them because they attacked us, a surprise attack. Perfidy. We are the modern day Japs. And I don't mean that in a racist way. We're bad people. We carried out a surprise attack under the flag of truth.
Jeremy and I,
in the world.
Jeremy and I talk a lot about, which is why we have the show named Uncontrolled Opposition, on how, the public is really misled and misinformed, and how, and this is something too, Scott, that we could talk about, how peace groups are infiltrated, and how people who are, real leaders in uniting us together are taken out by the CIA and the FBI, and how this COINTEL program has never been eradicated, how it's been expanded.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, look, I'm sitting here as a living example of this. The United States government's been at war with me since 1991. 1991 is when I married my wife. Prior to that, just so people understand, I was a rising star. Some would even say a superstar. Twice decorated by the director of the CIA for the work I did in the Soviet Union, not spying, but analytical work. Recognized by the Commandant of the Marine Corps as one of the best intelligence officers in the Marine Corps, fast tracked for special duty assignment. I made the decision to leave the Marine Corps because I had decided that I didn't want to kill Russians anymore. I had been to war and I saw war and I didn't like war. And I thought maybe there's better ways that we could go about resolving the problems in the world. And I reached out and I courted and I married Marina Khatiashvili. She was a Georgian citizen, a Soviet citizen. I traveled to Georgia. I asked her family for her hand in marriage, and we got married. When I did that, the United States government declared war on me. John Byrd, who was the head of the Arms Control Intelligence Staff of the CIA, immediately published sent letters out to every security establishment in America calling me a known threat to national security, and that I had been recruited by the Russians, that Marina was a KGB agent who had recruited me, and they put that in the file. They tried to destroy me from day one. When I got hired by the United Nations, the CIA said, you can't have the job because you're a traitor, literally a traitor. Fortunately, I had a boss, Rolf Akeas, a Swede, who said, no, we're going to hire him. But the CIA then came to me and said, Stu Cohen, you guys can look up the names. I don't make any of this stuff up. Stu Cohen was working with the Non-Proliferation Center at the time. He came to me and said, we have a problem because you're running the intelligence for the United Nations. Our job is to give the United Nations intelligence, but we can't give it to you because you're a Russian spy. I said, I'm not a Russian spy. You know I'm not a Russian spy. He said, well, you're also not on active duty anymore. He said, if you give us permission to do a full scope investigation of you, everything, turn over every stone, we'll determine this. I said, sure, you got my permission. I'm not running for anything. He said, but if we find anything, quietly leave. We're not going to arrest you and everything, but if we find anything, you have to quietly leave. No questions asked. I said, no problem. But if you don't find anything, I stay and you have to give me the support. He said, okay, that's a deal. We shook hands. Stu Cohen's one of the few CIA people that actually lived up to his duty, because he came back to me and he said, we've turned everything over. He said, you're as clean as the driven snow. We found that John J. Byrd had published letters and sent the letters out there. But when we contacted Byrd and asked for the proof, he said there was no proof. He just did it to destroy you. So I then spent the next several years working for the United Nations. But then the CIA wanted me to do wink and a nod stuff. Meaning, when I first started working, I told the United States government, I said, I wasn't born yesterday. I've been in the real world. I've done the real world. You have to tell me right now, who do I work for? Because I'm a UN employee. But I'm an American citizen. Am I going to be approached at some point in time and told I have to do something on behalf of the United States government? And if that's the precondition, I need to know that up front. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I have to know. I have to make a willful decision about what I'm about to do. And they came back, and I was in a meeting with the State Department, CIA, JCS, FBI, everybody. And the official was, no, you are to implement Security Council Resolution 687. You work for Rolf Akeas. That is the determination of the United States government. That is the official policy of the United States government. And I said, say it again and make it clear. I want everybody in the room to hear this, because I'm going to give you a response that I'm going to faithfully execute that order, and I will never deviate from that order. You've ordered me to implement Security Council resolution. You've ordered me to obey the lawful orders given by a non-American, the chief, the executive chairman, and that there will be no secret understandings. They said, that's absolutely correct. Less than a year later, they're coming at me with the secret understandings. And I said, I don't do the secret understandings. We have that disagreement. So now they began to attack me. At the height of my time as a weapons inspector, I was fighting the Iraqis who were trying to kill me, and I was fighting the CIA and the FBI who were trying to kill me. Literally. There was a period of time, funny story, in 1995, I had intercepted some gyroscopes in Jordan based upon an Israeli intelligence tip. Went in, we intercepted, prevented the gyroscopes from going in. Big victory, but it had to be kept secret, really secret. We couldn't talk about it because a lot of the stuff I did at the United Nations doesn't get done in the United Nations, like organizing covert SIGINT teams to operate inside Baghdad, listening to the personal communications of Saddam Hussein, not to spy on him, but to find out if he's ordering weapons to be moved while we are operating. We did a lot of that work. I did a lot of that work. So now we intercept this, but then the CIA got the King of Jordan to make a public announcement about how the Jordanians had worked with the United Nations Special Commission. So now everybody's saying, well, who? And we're trying to deny it, but we had intercepted Russian gyroscopes. So the Russians send the FSB to New York City, FSB colonel. And he says, I need to speak to the person who did the interception. And they didn't want to tell. And finally, my boss, because Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, said, okay, but it has to be done confidentially. He said, we'll protect them. Don't worry. We're the FSB. So I sat down and I met with this guy and I went through everything that happened. They said, we need you to come to Moscow and testify at trial because we're putting these people on trial. You're a witness. You're part of the chain of custody. We need you to testify. I went to my boss and I said, what do you want me to do? I mean, you guys want me to go and testify and suddenly everybody in the world knows that Scott Ritter's running covert operations around the world? And he said, no, you'll testify behind a screen. We'll disguise your voice and we'll protect your identity. And Rolf Case went, okay, we can do that. So I agreed. That night, I got a phone call from a senior Russian diplomat who would talk to me on occasion. And he, in his thick Russian accent, said, Scott, we must drink Guinness. Drinking Guinness was the sign of something very serious is about to happen. So we went to the Irish bar that we meet at. We poured the Guinness. We started drinking. He said, you cannot go to Russia. I said, why not? He said, because the FSB guy was sent here to get you to Russia so the Russian mafia could kill you. You're marked for death. You're responsible for somebody losing hundreds of millions of dollars and somebody has to die. And you're the man that's going to die. I said, well, great. So I'm not going to Russia, but they're going to come and get me in the United States. He said, nah, the hit is only if you go to Russia. It doesn't transfer out. But the FBI anyways put a team on me to protect me, just to make sure. I'm taking my daughters to their preschool. And we're waiting to pick them up. And again, remember, you're talking to a guy who's counterintelligence trained. I've been to the school. I know what surveillance looks like. I know when I'm being surveilled. And I'm sitting there going, there's 2 surveillance teams on me right now. I said, how? And they're not working for each other. They're both FBI teams. One was the team there to safeguard me from the Russian mob. The other team was the one investigating me for failing to play the game with the United States government.
Wow.
So the FBI was literally monitoring me at the same time for cross purposes. Welcome to my life. They've been trying to destroy me ever since. When I resigned from the Special Commission, I was called into the offices of Larry Sanchez. I'm using names right now just so people can look it up and understand I don't make anything up. Larry Sanchez at the time was the CIA's representative in New York City for the United Nations. He was a guy that I've been working closely with for years, coordinating inspections, coordinating intelligence. And I went in to talk to him and he had previously the FBI, he had warned me that the FBI was going to round me up in the summer of 1996. They're going to sweep me off the streets and they're going to bring me in. They're going to give me the workover so that I confessed. I said, confessed what? That you're working for Israel. Because now I'm working for Israel because I told you I went to Israel to get them to coordinate with us. And I said, well, this is absurd. I meet with you every time before I go to Israel and I coordinate with you everything I'm doing in Israel. And I have your permission to do anything I'm doing in Israel that deals with American information. How am I spying for Israel? He said, yeah. So he got the head of the CIA's general counsel to write me a letter. It's a secret letter. I didn't get to hear, but he showed it to me. And it basically was to the FBI saying everything Scott Ritter does inside, we're running Israel is coordinated with the CIA. And they said, moreover, when we give classified information to the United Nations, it's declassified at the moment we give it to them because the United Nations is not permitted to have classified information. So anything Scott Ritter brought to Israel is unclassified. Therefore, you have no jurisdiction over this anyways. And that prevented me from getting arrested in the summer of 1998. But now we roll in, I'm going to resign. And he said, before you resign, you have to call the National Security Council. They need to speak to you. So I called them up and they said, please don't resign, because if you resign, that's the end of the inspections. You're it, you're the guy. We need you to stay in place and do your job. And I said, but the job I'm doing, you won't let me do. You just blocked me from doing an inspection in August of a critical facility. He said, yeah, that would have started a war. I said, you don't get to make that call. It's the executive chairman that gets to make that call about whether or not we do an inspection. I don't work for you. I work for the executive chairman. You remember our original agreement? Yeah. No, you work for us. I said, I don't. I hung up the phone and I said, I'm resigning. Larry Sanchez is a good friend of mine. He stuck out his hand and he shook it. And he said, this is the last time we'll be able to speak. He said, when you walk out that door, you're going to become an enemy of the United States of America. And the FBI, and I apologize, I'm going to say something on YouTube, and please forgive me, but it's important that I use the exact words because people need to understand the seriousness. He said, the FBI is going to fuck you in the ass for the rest of your life. They're going to fuck you in the ass, and they're going to fuck your family in the ass. You will never know a moment's peace. The moment you leave this door and you submit your letter of resignation, it's over. You are an enemy of the United States of America. And an enemy for telling the truth, by the way. I mean, that's my crime, was telling the truth. And I walked out the door, and you know what? That's the second time the CIA said something that turned out to be absolutely true, because I have been an enemy of the FBI ever since. They've been seeking to fuck me in the ass ever since. I just had the FBI raid my house in the summer of 2024. They came into my house with 40 agents. They seized my electronics. Why? They were accusing me of being a foreign agent, an agent of the Russian government. To come into my house with their search warrant, they had to go to a judge. They had to do an affidavit of probable cause. And then they had to tell the judge not only why they were coming in, but what they expected to find. They lied to the judge everything they said was lied. These are classified affidavits, so I'm not allowed to see them. But I know the fact that they came in here. I know that I hadn't done anything with the Russians, so they had to be lying. And what they expected to find on my electronics, they didn't find it because they started returning my electronics. They admitted it was purely political, done on the Biden administration. And now you can say, well, so they're not harassing you anymore. I was debanked last month, debanked by the FBI. That means I lost my bank account and all the money in my bank account for at least a temporary period of time. You guys want to know what desperation is? Try going out to dinner with your wife. You pay for it with your credit card or your debit card. And on the way back, the light goes off in your car, says the gas tank's empty. But we're going to go home because, it's late, we're tired, we just ate. Say, don't worry, honey, I'll fill up the gas tank in the morning. And so I wake up in the morning, take her to work, go to the gas station, and try to run the card. Won't take it. Nothing. Go to the bank. I don't have bank accounts anymore. I've been debanked. I don't exist. My money doesn't exist. I don't have access to my money. I have a car that's empty. I don't have any money because my money's in the bank. It's all gone. I have bills that I have to pay. They timed it perfectly right before bills are supposed to be paid. Any money that I make comes in direct deposit to a bank account that no longer exists, which means I don't have any money coming in. You guys want to know panic? You want to know desperation? That's it. And the government can do that against me, and they can do that against anybody, and they are doing it against me, and they are doing it against anybody. We're supposed to live in a democracy where we, the people of the United States, are empowered to have free speech. If by exercising my free speech, I've been targeted by the United States continuously since 1991. Since 1991, I have been treated as an enemy of the United States of America. I'm the single most patriotic person you're ever going to meet in your life. I will die for this country. I will die for the Constitution. I will die for every single one of you. I will lay my life on the line for this country. But this country isn't defined by presidents. This country isn't defined by politicians. This country is defined by the Constitution of the United States of America. And if we have presidents and politicians who are not adhering to that, we have a duty and obligation as American citizens to speak out, not just speak out, but demand adherence. The only defense of the Constitution comes from that which the people are willing to do to defend the Constitution. The moment we abandon the Constitution, our politicians will operate in accordance, because they didn't become politicians to serve the Constitution. They became the politicians to serve their own narcissistic desires, their own ego. We now know that members of Congress acknowledge straight up that it's a money-making job. How do you go from somebody who makes $56,000 a year when you first joined Congress, 2 years later, you're worth $33 million. You stay in for another 6 years, you're worth $230 million. Because it's corrupt. Insider trading, deals are cut, etc. And these people join, and this is how they control them. You can't have a Mr. Smith goes to Washington? You can't have that kind of guy anymore. They won't allow that. They won't allow integrity. The people that do have integrity, let's say Massey, he gets attacked, slammed. Margaret Taylor Greene, you may not agree with her politics, but she stood up for what he stood for. She got attacked, driven out. The people that have integrity get attacked. They get driven out. Everybody who survives in Washington has compromised, has made compromises, monetary compromises, and as I told you before, sexual compromises. They will go out of their way to break you, to own you. Then they reward you. They feed you. They give you the money. They make you feel good about yourself. They give you, time on TV to become important. But what they've done is they've betrayed the basic principles of this country, the Constitution, and we, the people of the United States of America. We are the last bastion of defense. We, the people. And we can't allow ourselves to be intimidated. I don't expect people to do what I did. My wife and I have had conversations about this many times. And I asked her, I said, should I have played the game? And she said, that's a tough question to ask me. She said, I'm very proud of you for what you've done. But she said, the marriage that I thought I was getting in when I married you isn't what happened. I was marrying, hoping that we'd have peaceful life, have children, go on vacations, and all that. My life has been a living hell. And that's a hell of a thing for a man to hear from a woman he loves, to say, because she married me, her life has been a living hell. A living hell because of what the government came after her. They actually boxed her, polygraphed her, ostensibly to help me. We're trying to get Scott back in the game, they said, but we need to polygraph you because you've been accused of being his KGB controller. They weren't doing it, Jeff. They're trying to intimidate her. They threatened
Scott,
her with arrest. Yeah.
We've come up to 2 hours. I'd really like to end on what you were saying about, what we need to do as the American people. We need to speak. We need to resist and go to anti-war demonstrations and show that we want. Go ahead. You take it away. The way you deliver that. But let's end on that note.
Well, here's the thing.
Go back to what you said, just to end it. Give us like that last pep speech, and then Jayme's going to come on and cut it.
I was doing a book event in New York City about perestroika in the time of disarmament in the time of perestroika, and we were talking about the importance of arms control and the importance of continuing the New START treaty. And someone asked me the question, hey Scott, you're pretty good up here giving speeches and talking, but what are you going to do? And so I respond the way I always respond, with a big F you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to challenge you and every other American to join me in Central Park in June, 1 million person march, 1 million people in the streets in defense of arms control. Couldn't get anybody to join up. Talked about doing the Rage Against the War Machine became the alternative. Well, we can't do that, but we're going to do the Rage Against the War Machine. Turned out to be the biggest frickin' joke in the history of frickin' jokes.
I was calling. I mean, the Rage Against the War Machine was decent, but the opposition to it, I was calling it the members only anti-war group. You had to be a member to be able to protest.
But
war.
they weren't protesting.
It was crazy.
It was a vehicle of empowerment. They were looking to empower themselves, and look what happened after Rage Against the War Machine.
I do believe that the peace movement has been infiltrated. In my own tiny little experience, that I was in the Green Party for a while, and I wrote a world peace platform, and I brought it to the people in the Green Party who were into that, which was the GPAX group. And they liked the world peace platform I had prepared, and they signed on to it, and they improved it. They did all kinds of, changes to it. And then we presented it to the Green Party to adopt it as a platform plank, because the Green Party does not have a world peace platform, folks. It's a joke. I mean, it's a joke. So we presented this, and you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. Because Howie Hawkins and Gloria Matera were saying, let's send weapons to Ukraine. And that was what was going on when we were trying to move with a world peace platform. So everything is infiltrated.
Correct.
So, we have to go beyond that.
Are you familiar with a flash mob? You've heard about flash mobs, right? They're pretty cute. people coordinate, and they have a flash mob. Do you need a permit to do a flash mob? No, you just show up, do your flash mob thing, and go out. Let's forget the Green Party. Let's forget any party. Let's forget everybody. Let's talk about we, the people of the United States of America. Let's have a flash mob in Central Park in June. Don't ask any permission from anybody. We're not asking the city for permission. We're not asking. Let's just pick a day. And on that day, at the appointed hour,
all right,
we all show up.
Let's pick a day. Let's pick a day. What do we got in June?
Let's look at the calendar right now.
What do we got in June? What do we got in June? Okay, everybody, let's do it. All right, we got June. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking at June. You want a weekend, Jeremy?
Yeah, let's do a weekend. That way nobody has any excuses.
Yeah.
So June, we can do June 20th.
Okay, let's do it.
June 20th,
all right,
Saturday,
I'm putting it down.
June
I'm putting it
20th.
down. Jeremy, we're going to New York. I'm
Let's
from
do
New York,
a
but now I'm in
flash
Florida.
mob in New York City at 3:00 in the afternoon. At 3:00 in the afternoon, anybody worth anything, any American who claims to be American, I'm not talking about Republicans, Democrats, you're an American. You want peace. You want this war to end. On June 20th at 3:00 in the afternoon, we need 1 million people to be in New York City, Central Park, and we stop everything and we make our voices be heard. 1 million people jamming up New York City, Central Park. No permission needed, ladies and gentlemen. Just go to the damn park, find a spot, and at 3:00, shout out your announcement. Start getting on your social media, taking pictures, flooding it. You can't be ignored. And then after an hour of this, go home. If you do that, that'll be the most singularly empowering thing you've ever done in your life. It'll probably be the most meaningful thing you've ever done, because what you've done is you've led by example. What you've done is show people that we, the people of the United States, have a voice, that we can't be controlled by political parties, by people who have been compromised. We can't be controlled by anybody, that we have free will. So there it is. Let's do it. Let's make this thing happen. Let's promote it. Flash
It's on
mob.
my calendar. All right,
Okay.
you heard it. You heard it, everybody. In New York
Well,
and all
it's not
over.
a flash mob if you all plan it to that detail. Come on,
We'll be
Sylvia,
there.
cut me a break.
We'll be
I'm reading
there.
the comment. I shouldn't read comments, but
We'll be
cut me a
there.
break, Sylvia. Cut me a break. You know,
We'll be
it is a
there.
flash mob. It's my version of a flash mob. So there
Sounds
it
good
is.
to me. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, for your generosity and coming on the show and giving us so much of your time. You're really in demand. I mean, your understanding of especially what's going on in Iran right now tactically is just, really it's in demand. You're a hot ticket. So thank you so much for joining us.
I was taking notes most of the time because a lot of good insider information and stuff. So
Yeah, really amazing. All right. Well, where's Jayme? I think we put Jayme. Jayme, come back.
Okay,
I
well,
didn't
I'm
want to
gonna sign
interrupt
off.
the
I'm
flow.
gonna put it
Normally
up
I come
online.
on.
So yeah, I'll put the show on our Substack, and then I can send you.
Yeah, send me the link
you
and
can
I'll
promote
put it
on
out on
social
whatever I
media,
got.
Jayme, could
Put
you
it on
pick
your
out a couple of
Substack, yeah.
clips?
Yeah, let's
like
keep in touch, Scott. That would
for
be
this?
great if you can write for Covert Action. So
I look, I'm a man of my word. So
Yeah.
when I don't do something, it's not that I just, first of all, again, if I'm going to write for you, I got to write something meaningful.
yeah, exactly.
And then what happens is, for instance, there are at least 2 articles that I started to write for you, and then they got overcome by events.
Yeah,
And then before I could refocus, I deploy, I go to Russia, I go someplace
it's
else.
a moving target. It's a moving
so
target.
it's just that I just have to, like right now, I mean, I'd love to be able to right now stop and go write that article for you, but I've got like 15 people that I have to do interviews with, and I have employers I have to write for, and
yeah.
I have a wife I have to, I have a list of
You got a life.
to-dos.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
it.
well, that's okay.
And a
Take your
family.
time. Yeah, whenever you can, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, thanks.
All right.
Gloria,
Well,
thank
take
you,
care.
and Jamie,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
a lot,
Yeah.
guys.
Oh,
Bye
thanks,
bye,
guys.
everybody.
Uh,
Thank you so
It's
much.
fascinating.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, fascinating.
Well, we're going to go ahead and
Take care,
wrap up the
guys.
show then. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. You've been watching it for about 2 hours. Thanks to Scott. We only thought we had him for an hour. Also, thanks to Craig Pasta Jardula. He's the executive producer of this show. And I'm probably going to cut this up for 2 episodes, so we have one in the can for the radio in case they need something. So you're saying Central Park on June 20th?
At 3
I'm
p.m. At 3
I'm
p.m.
saying let's also add the National Mall in DC on that same day for people who can't get into New York. I personally can't afford to set foot in New York. It's just too expensive. So, but I can get to DC. So let's do that. I'll make a clip of that too. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. This has been Uncontrolled Opposition. We'll be back next week with another episode. Have a good weekend and keep fighting. See you later. Bye.
Thanks.